Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and we are back in the Wasteland for a new Thursday series where we're going to expand on the work that Moira Brown did and come up with a thorough Wasteland survival guide. So welcome to Emmy's Wasteland Survival Guide. So when we discuss survival in adverse conditions like in the wilderness or the wasteland, people often prioritise the wrong thing. The first priority when we're talking about survival is shelter. All the food and the water in the world won't help you if you end up dying of hypothermia overnight. So shelter from the elements is the most important thing to find first. So if we take a look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the base of the pyramid is the essential physiological needs for survival, including food, water, warmth and rest. And then this is followed in the next tier by security and safety. So we need to find shelter as a basic fundamental survival need, just as much as we need oxygen, water and food. So what do we mean by shelter? The definition is a structure that's either a natural formation or built by man that protects against elements, heat, cold, rain, wind, snow, predators, anything like that. Exposure to excessive heat or cold will kill you faster than dehydration or starvation will. So shelter can be permanent, like houses, apartments, castles, bunkers, bus stop shelters, or it could be something temporary, like a tent, an igloo, tarpaulins, and natural formations like caves can also be considered in this category. So we'll look at fallout shelter, which, excuse the pun, but when we look at the fallout universe and how people are surviving in the wasteland, we can see a range of shelters, and these can be broadly split into two different options, using either pre-existing structures or building shelters from scratch, and we do see all kinds of examples of this across the games. So with pre-existing structures, using existing houses is one of the most common options in Fallout when you look at towns like Goodsprings and Prim, where people have taken over the houses that were already there and still intact. This is pretty common around New Vegas because of Mr. House, because he massively reduced the impact the bombs had on the Mojave area, so a lot of the pre-war buildings and houses and things are still intact and still suitable. However, in the capital wasteland, it's much rarer, the bombs weren't stopped and there was a lot more damage done, so a lot of the housing around Washington DC and the surrounding area is really badly damaged. The city itself is piled high with rubble all over the place. But there are a few places where people are living in intact houses, such as in Andale. I mean, sure, the people of Andale are cannibals, but they've got a good thing going with their nice little houses. And if we head over to the Commonwealth again, we see places where there's intact or mostly intact houses that make for good shelter. Covenant especially has a great setup with the walls, the single entrance, and the pre-war houses that are ideal for the people living there. You also find that some people are using other kinds of buildings, so the super duper marts in Fallout 3, there's a bunch of raiders that have got a good setup there because there's food supplies and things as well. Schools, hospitals, office buildings and motels that have been repurposed for housing, and a lot of underground locations like bunkers, sewer systems and metro tunnels work very well, and you do find people living down there. And even in some of the vaults like Vault 114, Vault 3, a few of the vaults that have been abandoned by the original dwellers, or like Vault 114 that never had original dwellers, but it obviously makes for a really good shelter for people. What are the benefits of using a pre-existing structure? So for one, it already exists. That's kind of a given. It might need some repairs or some alteration, but the bulk of the work is already done for you. You might even find that there's still access to water and power, and there might even be usable furniture like beds and tables, so it's a lot easier to just use what's already there. The downside is that obviously these buildings haven't exactly had a lot of maintenance over the last 200 years, so there is potential risk of damage or collapse, and certainly some degree of reinforcement or repair will probably be required at some stage. But pre-built structures that are solid and workable will be competitive, so you might find that other people want to come in and fight you for the best shelters. We see that in Vault 3 in New Vegas, where the Fiends basically killed the vault dwellers and took the vault for themselves, knowing that it was an ideal setup for them to stay secure so that they could continue harassing the NCR. and it would be harder for the NCR to come back and take revenge because they were hiding in a vault that they could keep secure. And the other downside is that finding what you need to make repairs or maintain the shelter could be difficult as well, and that includes raw materials as well as tools. Doing it yourself, we see shelters and even entire towns built from scrap and old vehicles. Megaton from Fallout 3 is an iconic example. It was built around an unexploded bomb which revealed some groundwater, and people used parts of old aeroplanes and vehicles from a nearby airfield to build the town. So it was founded by a group of people that wanted to get into Vault 101 but were denied entry, so they set up and built this town nearby. We see it in Fallout 4 quite a lot as well, so even in Diamond City, which was built on the baseball field of Fenway Park being an iconic sporting landmark in the US both in game and in real life, and then a settlement emerged within the safety of the wall with houses, businesses and even a newspaper press. There's also a school and a church for all faiths, so Diamond City has grown up and it's kind of a bit of the best of both worlds because it's making use of pre-existing structures and infrastructure, but it's also, people have built what they needed and they've built things from scratch using that area as a secure place to build. And obviously Fallout 4, you have the option to build your own shelters in the settlements, and we can establish these things, and we can, make beds out of screwdrivers and pre-war money, which is a whole other kind of conversation really about the logic of the crafting system. But a lot of the things that you can build in Fallout 4 are kind of scrappy looking, and that's kind of by design. But in New Vegas, you can see most people are living in existing buildings, but there are places where things have been built post-war, such as the junk wall that surrounds Westside. And, there are sort of little shacks and things that you can run across all over the place as well. So the benefits of doing it yourself is that you can build what you need where you need it. You can, of course, make use of the existing structures as well, like we talked about with Diamond City. And Westside and the Sharecropper Farms in New Vegas also do the same thing, using existing structures and building new ones as well where needed. The downside is that you need to find the materials to build with. A lot of the scrap will be damaged or degraded and might not be fit for purpose. You're still going to need to maintain the structures and finding the tools and materials to do so, which could be kind of challenging. Hammers and nails are easy to find, but if you need something like welding equipment, then that might be a bit more difficult to get your hands on, and access to utilities like water and power could be a challenge when you're building from scratch because there's not really an easy way of building new sewage infrastructure or anything like that. And then if we look at naturally occurring structures that provide shelter, we're generally talking about caves. So looking at these as shelters, so you see at Little Lamplight, which was a kind of tourist attraction before the bombs, and we obviously know the story of Little Lamplight, where it was these kids that didn't trust adults because what happened to one of the dwellers in Vault 87. But these kids and their dogs basically live in this cave, and there's water and there's the fungi that they can eat and things like that. Cannibal Johnson, who's one of the Enclave remnants, lives in a cave in Fallout New Vegas. Brian Virgil hides in a cave in the Glowing Sea to stay out of the way of the Institute. And then one of my favourite examples of this is Randall Clark, the survivalist from Honest Heart, who has set up really good organised shelters in a number of caves across the Zion area. And if you go through his diaries and things, you really get a good picture of what happened immediately post bombs and how he's survived and how he set this up. If you want to know more about that, I do have a video covering all the details of Randall Clark's story, which I'll link here. So if you're interested in that, it's there and you can learn all the details about what he did. The benefits of using a cave is that there's generally little maintenance that you need, and a lot of them are sort of structurally sound. You might find that there's some natural growing food like mushrooms, and there could also be a decent source of water inside. Caves are often well hidden, so there's less risk of invasion by raiders and stuff like that. But there's also strong protection against the elements and radiation. However, there is dangerous wildlife that favour these caves, so you might find yourself dealing with yalgoi, deathclaws, night stalkers, and other kinds of resources could be harder to come by, such as ammo and medical supplies, which aren't always stashed in caves. Electricity is also lacking in a lot of these places, so you would need to find a generator and fuel for the generator if that was something that you wanted to have. And water might be present, but it could be contaminated and it needs to be purified to make it drinkable. And caves can be quite isolated from society and other people, which might be the goal, but it does also leave you a bit more vulnerable and potentially lacking certain types of supplies if you're not willing to go out and scavenge and trade with other people. With all this in mind, and the different options, what is it that you want in a good shelter? So you want good cover, a roof, walls, ideally a secure entrance that you can lock, and that keeps wind and rain out, it helps keep you warm. Something to keep you warm as well is essential, so if you can have a fire of some sort to keep you warm, blankets, windproofing, that kind of thing. Trying to keep it clean as well, so having ground coverage would ideally help to keep the inside of the shelter clean. You do also have to deal with waste, so normal kind of trash is something that you can deal with, but we do also have to think about human waste, and it's not a nice subject, but if you haven't got a flushable toilet available to you in the shelter that you're in, then you need to come up with something, because unfortunately everybody is going to need to use the toilet at some point on a regular basis, so you have to find a way of dealing with that. You don't want that hanging around, so having some kind of latrine system or a cesspit and burying the waste is generally the best way to deal with it if you don't have a proper sewage system. We see an example of this in the Fallout TV show, where Maxis is assigned the unpleasant task of emptying the tire toilets into holes and burying it. It's not nice, but it is something that you have to think about. You might have heard the phrase, don't shit where you eat. That idiom is usually meant to say don't cause trouble with people that you spend a lot of time around, like your neighbours or colleagues, but there is a more literal interpretation of that. Human faeces should be absolutely nowhere near your water or food supplies or where you sleep, because that helps prevent the spread of certain diseases. So sewage management is important. You do also need to have a way of accessing potable water, which is water that is safe to drink or water that you can treat to make it drinkable, and food supplies as well, ideally a renewable source of food like crops or livestock. We'll touch more on the water and food issues in later videos, and having access to stockpiles of medical supplies, ammo, that kind of a thing. And then the final part is defences. So certainly when you're in Fallout, you need to defend your settlements. You need to have things to keep you safe from raiders, from dangerous wildlife, all that kind of nonsense that's running around the wasteland. So turrets, watchtowers, walls, having a place to monitor the surrounding area, somewhere high up that you can see what's approaching you. And that can make a big difference. So particularly a favourite of mine is Novak, the setup using the big dinosaur, where the mouth of the dinosaur is a viewpoint and a sniper's nest. So you've got two snipers taking alternating shifts to keep watch to protect the town from the dinosaur, and I think that's great. It's really funny, but also quite a sensible move. So we know how important now shelter is and what you kind of want in a shelter. So one thing that I think is worth noting is the quest Sanctuary in Fallout 4, where Sturges gives you a to-do list to set up the settlement for them. It's worth noting the order in which it gives you the tasks. So sheltered beds is the first thing, then water, then food, and then defence. And that should be your order of priority in any survival situation. You need to be sheltered and then find water, then food, and then worry about defence. That's the order that it should be. So it makes a lot of sense logically. So let me know, what do you think about the different types of shelter in Fallout? Have you got a favourite one? Personally for me, I do like Megaton, I like Rivet City, I like Diamond City, and I think Novak is quite fun too with the dinosaur and everything. So let me know in the comments, and thanks very much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye.